everyone, this is our training video on social stories and functional communication training. Our group members are Danielle Benden, Katie Brown, Shauna Hoisington, myself, Randy McClelland, Amanda Mercado, and Catherine Richardson. We are looking at Ellison Preschool, which is an inclusive school in an urban area that serves 200 students. The student body currently has 50 regular education students and 150 special education students, which all range in age from 3 to 5 years old. Many of these students receive speech therapy and or are nonverbal. The staff is having trouble with ongoing behavioral issues in every classroom. So we are here to train the school staff on interventions that will hopefully help to decrease problem behaviors, including aggression. The interventions we chose to focus on are social stories and functional communication training.
What is a social story? Social stories were first created by Carol Gray in 1991. A social story is an individualized story whose main goal is to build social skills and understanding for individuals. They were originally designed for individuals with autism due to their deficits in social interactions and communications, but they also are good for students with developmental disabilities. Data shows that social stories have proved to be effective with preschool students, elementary, and secondary students. According to Gray and Guerin, social stories should include the following components: an accurate understanding of a situation or scenario that incorporates appropriate social cues. The story can also be written from the perspective of the learner or others, and it should also include the appropriate responses we want the learner to engage in. All right, so research behind social stories. Benden and DiCarlo did a study in 2008, and they found that they were able to give children a concrete example of expectations in the environment using social stories. They were frequently used with students to improve socially significant behaviors. In 2006, Delano and Snell paired children with autism to their typically developing peers and targeted appropriate social engagement with peers. The intervention consisted of reading a social story, followed by comprehension questions, and finally a play session. They were able to increase the duration in which students engaged in the appropriate social engagement with their peers. In 2007, Crozier and Takani used social stories to target maladaptive behavior of 3 young boys. They implemented the use of social stories, one for circle time, one for communicating with peers, and one for appropriately playing with peers. And they found that the use of social stories were able to increase the appropriate behaviors. And then in 2008, Chan and O'Reilly used social stories for 2 boys diagnosed with autism in the inclusive setting. They were trying to increase the appropriate social interactions, hand raising, and vocalizations of the boys. And they were able to do so after reading the social stories, answering comprehension questions with them, and then engaging in role play scenarios.
How to implement social stories. Materials may be a computer, printer, laminator, circle time visuals, data collection sheet, and pictures. Step-by-step guide for implementation of a social story. Determine the topic based on a socially significant behavior. Individualize and give specific examples for your learner. Develop social stories. Write the story with clarity and precision. Make sure to use specific visuals to clarify for your learner if possible. Additional supports. Consider various settings where the social story may be implemented. Review and publish the story. Review that the target behavior was addressed in your social story. Consider that the story is individualized and clear and concise. Introduce the story. Consider the topic and introduce it to the learner. Consider the setting and staff and sensitivity to the topic and for your learner. Check for comprehension and revise. Make sure that your learner understands the story. Modify the social story if necessary for target behavior. Lastly, generalization, maintenance, and fading. Make sure that the learner generalizes the story and the skill and maintain the target behavior as appropriate.
Here's a quick modeling video to show you how social stories can be used in your classroom.
Social stories can be really helpful in your classroom just to give kids an idea of what the expectations are for their behavior and what happens when they are appropriate in their behavior and what happens when they might not be. So you would want a social story that has lots of pictures, very simple words. There are tons of resources online where you can find free ones that are already made, but we'll give you training on how to write your own if that's something that you want to do. So a great time to do your social stories would be in the beginning of the day when you're already doing your morning circle. And I'll demonstrate that for you real quick. So these are my students. They're sitting nicely in their circle. So yeah, you're going to read very clearly and slowly. I can share with my friends. I love to play with toys and games. I like to play alone sometimes, but I love to play with my friends even more. We can have fun and play together. So you continue the social story like that. And then at the end, you might want to ask a few questions, maybe just 3 or 4 to your class. And a question might just be something as simple as, so Katie, when you want a toy that your friend is playing with, what should you do? It's my turn. Exactly. And that's all you have to do. And then if the problem behavior does occur, after the fact, you can reread the social story to them so they understand why the consequences were delivered.
All right, so how can you use social stories to address the needs in your classroom? First of all, you can use them to facilitate inclusion. The school is composed of typically developing students as well as students with special and diverse needs. So social stories are an intervention that can help facilitate inclusion. Social stories introduce changes to routines and schedules. Many students are rigid when it comes to changes in their schedule and routine, but social stories can help to promote and teach flexibility. They also provide explanations for other behaviors. Social stories can teach students that there are many different ways that others can react and that is okay. They teach new academic and social behaviors that might not already be in the student's repertoire. And they can be combined with other instructional strategies, such as differential reinforcement, functional communication training, and modeling.
What is functional communication training? According to Tiger, Hanley, and Bruzek, functional communication training is a differential reinforcement procedure in which an individual is taught an alternative response that results in the same class of reinforcement identified as maintaining problem behavior. Problem behavior is typically placed on extinction and no longer is reinforced. What this means is we are going to reinforce a different behavior where they can still get what they want without having to use their problem behavior. How to implement functional communication training. The materials that you will need will vary depending on the communication mode, but may include augmentative and alternative communication devices such as tablets or voice output devices, picture exchange communication system, otherwise known as PECs, picture cards, paper, and writing utensils. The communication response will be individualized to each student. When selecting the communication response, you'll want to consider the response effort. Communicative responses should take less effort than the problem behavior. Consider the social recognition of the response. They should be easily recognizable so they are more likely to receive reinforcement. And consider the likely speed of response acquisition. Responses that can be quickly acquired and that are within the learner's repertoire should be selected first. Step-by-step guide. When implementing functional communication, you'll first want to conduct a functional analysis to determine what's maintaining the problem behavior, then select a communicative response that's recognizable and able to be acquired quickly, identify a trained person to initiate the FCT, arrange multiple opportunities to prompt and reinforce your chosen communicative response. Teach the response using most to least or least to most prompting. Reinforce every correct response. Withhold reinforcement for the problem behavior. And after your problem behavior is reduced, you'll want to thin reinforcement for the communication response, Promote generalization. Teach caregivers how to respond to both the communicative response and the problem behavior. Arrange learning in the natural environment, and over time, increase the complexity of the response.
And here's a modeling video to show you an example of functional communication training.
One strategy in functional communication is the PEC system, or Picture Exchange Communication System. So I'm going to demonstrate that for you real quickly. So say you have the problem behavior of a kid taking a toy from another kid and leading to aggression. First, obviously block the aggression, and then you're going to have a picture of the item. So you're going to prompt as much as you need to for her to pick that up and give it to you. And when she gives it to you, immediately say, car, and give her the item. The delivery needs to be immediate, and it needs to be, again, something equivalent. They're the same car, so that works well. And yeah, so when you're teaching the skill, make sure that you're prompting it as much as you need to. That might be like I did, kind of a physical prompt, or it might just turn into a gestural prompt of just pointing to the picture. And again, you want to always say the item so that they're getting that language piece as well.
How does FCT address problem behaviors in your classroom? It reduces problem behavior by providing reinforcement for an alternative response that provides the same reinforcement as the problem behavior. It provides a communicative method for the student that is within their repertoire and allows them to communicate what they need or want. There are multiple ways to utilize FCT, allowing it to be individualized for each student and their needs. And FCT can be used for multiple responses and multiple problem behaviors.
Overview of school-wide implementation. Students at Ellison Preschool will benefit from functional communication training and social stories interventions as appropriate. FCT will help decrease problem behavior and increase functional language throughout the school day. Staff in the school should always consider the modality of communication and be consistent across settings. Social stories will help teach socially appropriate behavior. Staff should consider sensitivity to the topic and the learner. Stories should be clear and concise. The story should also offer appropriate social cues and response of others. This will help teach students at Ellison how to socially interact with others and increase appropriate social behaviors across settings and staff throughout the school day. Final tips. Make sure to collect data, promote communication, and always ask questions. Be sure to ask for a model when needed and always be open to feedback.